The 2014 to 2018 Royal Enfield Continental GT. India-based Royal Enfield has been busy expanding its footprint as of late. The newly minted US dealerships will be scampering for a piece of the action with a bike that is sure to appeal to the increasingly important millennial buyers, the Cafe Tastic Continental GT. Built with an unmistakable retro flavor and powered by a 535cc (29.1 horsepower) engine, the GT brings a relatively authentic cafe experience to the table. Maybe even a little too authentic in some ways, perhaps? We'll find out. The factory established a foothold on U.S. soil just a few years ago, and it has introduced its very first engine to be designed in-house, but the GT is more of a reflection of the company's deep roots than a product of its more progressive agenda. Continue reading for my review of the Royal Enfield Continental GT. Design. Not really a retro piece as much as it is a ride that drew inspiration from the mid-60s and never really tried to evolve. Straight up cafe. That's what you see, and that's what you get. The factory drew from design elements going back to the 60s for what has to be the most authentic cafe on the market. This isn't actually a retro piece as much as it is a ride that drew inspiration from the mid-60s and never really tried to evolve, and I love it for that. A laced wheel, standard forks and a round headlight leads the way, and the lack of a cafe-style bullet fairing does nothing to diminish the overall cafe vibe. Clip-on bars and bar-end mirrors keep the front end clean with all the instrumentation tucked away in the twin clocks mounted ahead of the triple tree. Though clip-ons are definitely not in line with history, the Superman riding position they encourage is spot on as they pull the rider down over the fuel tank in an aggressive position. Admittedly, this position has a tendency to load up the wrists and neck much like superbike-style rides, at least at low speeds where there's insufficient wind pressure to help support your trunk and bucket. The 3.56-gallon fuel tank carries the classic knee indents that immediately call to mind the British cafe racers of yesteryear, with a flyline that plummets to the racer-style solo seat with a tail fairing to finish it. Taillight, turn signals and tagholder obscure all but a sliver of the rear fender, and the upswept exhaust and contrasting springs on the coil-over shocks complete the ensemble. Chassis. Nimble and compact, the GT feels stable on the straights, but remains eager in the curves. A double downtube, double cradle frame sets the tone with the classic cafe geometry that gives it a straight backbone from head to tail. Suspension is pure D vanilla with standard, non-adjustable 41mm forks up front and a set of piggyback, coil-over shocks out back. The front forks turn in 4.3 inches of travel while the shocks move through an 3.1-inch range with the obligatory spring preload adjuster. Yeah, it could be better, but it's very historically accurate as it sits, and I suppose that's part of the charm. Brembo anchors bite the single 300mm front disc and the 240mm rear without any fandanglary such as ABS or linked brakes, just honest braking and feedback. Simple and clean, just like its looks. At only 405 pounds wet, the brakes are sufficient. Laced wheels mount a 190/18 hoop up front and a 130/18 in back to help keep the bike nimble, and it seems to have helped. The GT feels stable on the straights, but remains eager in the curves. True to its nature, the wheelbase is nice and compact at only 53 inches long with an 81-inch overall length. Drivetrain. Sure, it's got electronic ignition and FE now, but the overall engine design is straight out of the 60s. Like the rest of the Continental GT, the engine can be taken at face value. It's not a copy or a tribute, but an actual relic. Sure, it's got electronic ignition now instead of points and an electronic fuel injection system instead of a carburetor, but the overall engine design is straight out of the.
If you liked this video, please share your thoughts in the comments below and don't forget to hit the subscribe button.